session. Myself, I am engineer Hampika from Electronics and Communication Engineering. Here today our topic is going to discuss about defining a problem results in a clear-cut research objectives. See, here what was the research problem? In previous session we discussed about the research problem statement and how important of choosing a problem statement. What are the factors before going to check the problem statement? So a researcher, firstly they use it to symptom of detection. Then they go for the analysis of the situation. Then they use it to decide about the problem definition. And after defining also they use it to analyze of the situation of that current particular time. Then after confirming the problem definition they use it to statement of a research objectives. So research objectives are also very crucial to do the researcher to reach their expected results, what really they are about to expecting with their question, with their problem statement. So the research objectives are the specific components of the research problem that you will be working or to answer or complete. In order to answer the overall research problem. This was the beautiful definition given by a great scientist Churchill on 2001. And the other statement is the objectives refer to the questions to be answered through the study, or they indicate what we are trying to get from the study or expected results or outcome of the study. So, what was the hypothesis again? Whereas hypothesis is usually considered as the principal instrument in a research because it is the main function to suggest new experiments and observations. In fact, many experiments are carried out with a deliberative objective of a testing hypothesis. The decision maker often use it to face situations wherein they are interested in testing hypothesis on the basis of available information and then take decisions on the basis of such testing. And hypothesis is an assumption about the relations between variables. Hypothesis can be defined as a logically conjugated relationships between two or more variables expressed in the form of a testable statement again. Relationships are conjugated on the basis of the network of associations established in the theoretical framework formulated for the research study. So the research hypothesis is nothing but it is a predictive statement that results independent variable to a dependent variable. Hypothesis must contain at least one independent variable and one dependent variable. Because hypotheses are a tentative and intelligent guess as to solution of the problem, which is a specific statement of a prediction. And what it is going to be described means it describes in a concrete terms what you expect to happen in the study. So the hypothesis is an assumption about the population of the study. It just like it delimits the area of a research and keeps the researcher on the right track. And what are the problem and what was the hypothesis separately again. See, the hypothesis is just an assumption that can be tested and can be proved to be right or wrong. Whereas a problem is just like it is a very broad question which cannot be directly tested. Because the primary quality of a researcher itself, the question comes to his mind or her mind to do work on it to reach the expected results. So that was the problem what raised by a researcher, and researcher is about to fill the gap of this problem to find the solution, which is very broad. Whereas the problem can be scientifically investigated after converting it into in a form of hypothesis again. Because problem is which is very broad, we can't be tested directly. Whereas hypothesis is an assumption. Firstly, we are supposed to do, and that can be tested, and that can be proved to be right or wrong. For example of a problem, if I took a problem as I would like to be very ancient days, everyone are using a landline mobiles, which is very static in a certain places, not able to carry by a persons. I would feel it is a problem. Then the one concerned candidate started working to convert a wired communication into a wireless communication. But it is a problem which is very broad. We can't test, either we are able to do or we are not able to do. Then the hypothesis helps to at least estimate our problem, to test our problem on an initial of a research by assumptions, using few variables that can be tested and can be proved it is a right or a wrong. And there are a few characteristics of a hypothesis mentioned in this slide. That was the conceptual clarity. It should be clear and precise. Specificity. How specific the research and limited in a scope. It should be specific and limited in a scope. And consistency research. It should be very consistent with the objectives of a research. And how consistent we have. For sometimes, whereas even in a hypothesis also, but deciding objectives always used to change based on the situation to reach their expected results, which is not much preferable actually. Whereas the testability, it should be capable of being tested. And expectancy variables, it should state the expected relationship between variables. All these are the characteristics of hypothesis. And the other one is the simplicity. How it's stated as so far as possible in a simple terms, in a understandable terms. Objectivity. It should not include a value of judgments or relative terms and any moral preaching. That was the objectivity. And theoretical relevance. How relevant it should be in a consistent with a sustainable body of established or known facts or existing theory. So how relevant it is. And availability of techniques. Statistical methods should be available for testing the proposed hypothesis. Always the statistical methods should be like this. So what was this availability of techniques available for testing the proposed hypothesis? And what are the sources of hypothesis required? The discussion with other researchers or colleagues or experts relevant to the research about the problem. It is origin and objectives in seeking a solution. That was the origin. The discussion itself, the origin to seeking about a solution. And examination of data and records for possible trends and peculiarities. The examination of a data is very, very important, and about to review later, and a review of a similar studies again. Review of a relevant studies, what required. And exploratory of personal investigation or observation. Because the research itself, it is a scientific investigation in an organized manner. So, on how the logical deduction from the existing theory, and how continuity of a research is there, and how it is intuition and a personal experience. Because for any research, what the researcher going to do in their span, in their boundaries, which is giving by a continued research with a future scope, always have a more weightage, because tomorrow doesn't like a today's situation. We can't predict the future's expectation. But at least when a researcher given a future scope in their own research point of view, there may be possibility of extensions, which gives a huge influence of a economy, nation's growth, even advancement. So the continuity of research is very, very important source for a hypothesis. And even intuition and a personal experience which about to share gives the inspiration or motto to other researchers. And there are few types of a hypothesis. What are those? Descriptive hypothesis. These are the assumptions that describes the characteristics of a variable. In which manner? Such as size, form, or a distribution. The variable may be an object, or a person, or organization, or a situation, or event, based on their particular research domains. One of the example what they mentioned in academics is the public enterprises are more amenable for centralized planning. And the other one is a relational hypothesis. These are the assumptions that describes the relationship between two variables. The relationship suggested may be a positive or a negative or a casual relationship. Families with a higher income spend more for recreations. And the other one is a casual hypothesis, which state that the existence of a change in one variable causes effect on the other variable. The first variable called as an independent variable, the other variable called as an dependent variable. The independent variable existence changes affecting on a dependent variable. And the other one is a null hypothesis. When a hypothesis is stated negatively, it is called a null hypothesis. It is a no difference or no relationship hypothesis, which states that no difference existing between the parameter and a static being compared to, or no relationship existing between the variables being compared. It is usually represented as H0. Whereas H0 is a representation of a null hypothesis. One of the example given is there is a no relationship between a family income and expenditure on reaction. which comes under null hypothesis. And the alternative hypothesis. What was the alternative hypothesis? Alternative hypothesis is that describes a researcher's prediction there is an existing a relationship between two variables, or it is opposite of a null hypothesis. Because null hypothesis already we discussed that there is no relationship between two variables. This is just like a relationship between two variables we are stating. So that was for sometimes we can mention alternative hypothesis is the opposite of null hypothesis, which represents as a HA. And HA is representing the alternative hypothesis, and there is a definite relationship between a family's income and expenditure on a reaction. Functions or role of hypothesis. See, which it gives a definite point of the investigation, provides a direction to the study. And also it determines the data needs. It specifies the sources of data. And it is also suggesting that research is likely to be more appropriate. It determines most appropriate technique of analysis. It also contributing to the development of theory. So, the other one is the research process and types of research and methods of research. See, what is research? Researching for a required thing or to prove what you believe. To do research, any researcher about to go through some process. That is defining as a research process. And based on the researchers, the research type used to be changed. So there are types of researchers again. And there are a few methods chosen by a researcher to do the research process. So that was the research methods. And before going in detail about the research process, what were the characteristics of research? Research is directed towards the solution of a problem, whereas the research is based upon observable experience or empirical evidence. Research demands accurate observations and descriptions. And what research involves? It always gathering a new data from a primary sources or using existing data for a new purpose. And what research activities are characterized? It should be characterized by carefully designed processes, not in a negligible manner. Research requires expertise. There is a skill necessary to carry out any investigation. And what are the factors that affect managerial decisions? Because decision making of a research which plays a very crucial role. And what were the factors affecting of a managerial decisions again? Here, internal factors. What internal factors includes? Generally, internal factors includes the factors present inside an organization, such as resources, technology, trade unions, cash flow, manpower, etc. Whereas external factors, what really influencing on a research is factors present outside the organization, such as government policies or political factors, socio-economic factors or a legal framework, a geographical environment, and a cultural factors, etc. And what was the quantitative factors? The factors that can be measured in the quantities such as time, economy, resources, manpower, etc. All these we use it to measure in the form of a quantitative manner because we will give units in a quantities. Whereas qualitative factors, these factors can't be measured in a quantity manner. Still, these measures in a quantity such as an organizational cohesiveness, a sense of belonging of a employees, risk of technological change, etc. Whereas the other final one is the uncertainty factor, factors which can't be predicted. To cover all these factors, I'll give one simple example or a simple situation of an innovation. Okay, for any researcher to do their research work, they use it to tie up with some organization based on the motto of a researcher. If the motto of a researcher is to pursue their prestigious degrees such as PhDs and all, they use it to join as a scholars in some institutes, either in a part-time or a full-time manner. Again, internal factors all comes under then institutes availabilities and what was the cash flow, what was the provisions given by such institutes. All these are the internal factors. If the motto of a researcher is to give some novel product using the industrial manufacturers, then they use it to go with the industrial manufacturer or organizations tie-up. Again here, the internal factors comes under technology, the resources, and what was the cash flow, and how returns after developing some particular product. Whereas coming to the external factors, by the researcher, what the researcher is supposed to give the workflow. Based on that, the government policies they use it to take, and political factors to implement the new era, and socio-economics factors. Either the socio-economic is affecting in a positive manner or in a negative manner. The best example of this is a pandemic situation, which very unpredictable, comes under uncertainty factors. For some cases, it is in a reverse flow, which is uncertainty factor affected of a decision, managerial decision to do the research on particular domain. And what was the qualitative factors involved in this is, again, if a person is supposed to give some product on such time, the organizational cohesive senses of belongings of employees, risk of technological change. Here, the risk factor they use it to analysis. We can't measure in a quantity still. And how quantitative factors. Of course, I have a formula to sort out certain vaccination for that particular situation, but how the cost factors are going to be, and how much time it should be take to give it as a product. This comes under quantitative again. And external factors comes under in this pandemic situation of vaccination innovation, the government policies and the political factors and socio-economic factors and the legal framework. Based on geographical area, the pandemic is going to change. The death rates are changed at that time based on the geographical areas. So again, that was a consideration from the external factor of that research, medical research at that point. And the cultural factors is the based on the culture, the lifestyle used to design by a human beings and how it affects on their health again. They used to consider. That was the decision. And internal factors. From so and so organization, I am able to give some certain vaccination at that time. Still, they used to go with the organization resources availability and what are the trade unions and what was the cash flow and how manpower they required and they are able to supply. These are the internal factors. Again, they used to think about to take a managerial decision. So all these factors affect the managerial decisions. And what are the types of research again? Generally, research itself, it is a scientific investigation, as everyone know. On that, there is a two types: descriptive research and analytical research. Coming to descriptive research, what is descriptive research?
Like, share and subscribe. Hit the bell icon for more updates.